Can you use your Kamado Joe in sub-zero temperatures? I share some tips to help make sure it's safe as well as more enjoyable. Let's get into it. Hey, I'm James from Smoking Dead Barbecue, and I get asked this question all the time. James, is it safe to use my Kamado Joe in the winter sub-zero freezing months? Or should I just store my grill? Well, my answer to this is no, don't ever store your grill, and yes, it is safe, but that's not to say there aren't some things that we need to adjust in winter months versus summer months. And so I'm going to go through some updated tips and tricks for winter grilling on a previous video I did a few years ago, since there's a couple new things you need to know, along with some other creature comforts or tips and tricks to help make the experience all that much more enjoyable when it is cold and you're getting the wet, white stuff outside. Let's get into it. So let's get started with perhaps my most important advice for adjusting from summer grilling to winter grilling, and that's going to be how do we light our Joe. In the summer, you can pretty much do no wrong here. If you want to use a charcoal chimney, that can be a great way to light your Joe or your offset, kettle, or even your solo stove, whatever you might be burning. But in winter months, this is a no-fly zone. Using my Thermapen IR here, I can get a reading on the outside of the dome. And obviously, as you would expect with snow, it is significantly below zero. So we don't want to take sub-zero ceramics and 1100 degree burning hot charcoal and just dump a full burning chimney into our cold ceramics. Ceramic cracks when it's stressed and it's changing temperature quickly, either getting warm quickly or cooling off quickly. These are our two problem points. And so what I like to do is I use my Grill Blazer grill gun, but I start a smaller fire in the middle and just let that fire spread naturally and warm up the entire grill gradually so that we don't have any of those problems. In addition to how we warm up our ceramics inside the grill, you want to do the same thing with your heat deflector plates. The slow roller is no worry, it's made out of metal, but our heat deflector plates are soapstone. We want to treat with caution the same way that we would treat our outside ceramics. And so what I like to do is pre-warm my ceramics. If I'm doing this in the Classic or the Big Joe, I like to install my heat deflectors in a pizza pie configuration so that they continue to warm, yet I'm able to get heat up into the dome. And in the Joe Junior, in these temperatures, I let it come up to about 300 degrees Fahrenheit or so till I can start to feel some warmth. It's not too much heat, and then I'll drop in my deflectors so that they can warm up. Never had an issue with that 200 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit range when dropping in cold ceramics. Where I would be worried is if I'm 400, 500, 600 degrees and now I'm dropping in those cold ceramics. So now that we've got our Joe down in terms of how we're going to light it and get going, as well as warming up our ceramics, I need to share a couple of other updates in terms of how your Joe performs in the cold versus the summer. So a question I had last year is, do the vent settings change in winter versus summer? And so the only way I knew how to test this is to do a test in summer when it was nice and warm and repeat that same test in the winter. And to my surprise, the vent settings were identical in winter from summer. But this year I've uncovered something that does change, and that has to come down to the information that we are getting off of our temperature gauge. And I didn't even notice it on the Classic or the Big Joe at first. It was the Kettle Joe that tipped me off to this, because the top dome is not insulated like the ceramic is on a normal Kamado Joe. And then I checked it on my Classic and my Big Joe, and I did notice to a lesser degree some of the same effect happening. And what I noticed is that when the temperatures were really, really cold outside, say 0 degrees Fahrenheit, negative 70 degrees Celsius, which is what we've been flirting with a couple of days here over the last week or two, is that the ambient air temperature was so cold and providing so much chilling based on the metal surface area, it was actually causing the probe to read inaccurately. And so using my meter probe, I was seeing 270 degrees Fahrenheit ambient temperature inside. I was only seeing 150 degrees on my Kettle Joe. And I was like, what's going on here? And I checked, and sure enough, when I used my Thermapen IR, I was getting the whole metal area of the gauge was sub-zero temperatures, and the heat inside the Joe was not enough to warm it up to read an accurate temperature. I checked this on my Classic and my Big Joe, and to a lesser extent, the same phenomenon is happening in those crazy, crazy cool temperatures. Again, 0 Fahrenheit, negative 17 C. This is very, very cold, but I was getting an inaccurate reading. And so one of the things that you can help overcome this is just using a digital probe that you trust in order to get that true information of what's going inside your grill, because the dome temperature, which is the tool that I use all the time, may start to give you a little bit of a false reading if that outside metal is just too cold to allow the inside probe do its work accurately. So now that we've covered safety as well as some significant performance changes that happen in winter to summer to make sure you're getting accurate information and can adjust your game plan accordingly, I want to cover a couple other things that are worth repeating in some of my previous videos, but they've been mixed all over. So to bring them all here in one place, this is what to do if your dome freezes shut. Now, I haven't had this issue for a couple years because most times I'm under a bit of protection from a pergola or a cover, and that prevents this from happening. So I highly recommend a cover if you're going to be in climates like this where you're getting snow or freezing rain. Because what can happen is that snow could melt or you get some freezing rain and then the temperature drops, and all of a sudden your gasket, if they have moisture in it, will freeze together. If that happens, don't panic. There's two ways that you can easily unstick this. One way, I like to take my Grill Blazer grill gun, just put the nozzle into the draft door, start a fire, just hold it there for a couple of minutes. This is the fastest and easiest way to unstick a frozen dome. If you don't have one of those and you use fire starters, you can do the exact same thing where you stick a fire starter in there, start a fire, and just let that burn and create some heat that will unthaw your frozen gasket so you can get to grilling. Whatever you do though, if you feel that stuck, don't panic and pull it open, because if you rip that gasket off, you're creating a lot more work to reseal it, especially in the cold temperatures where your hands may not like being out in the cold, much like mine aren't enjoying being out in the cold right now. So my next set of tips is all about helping keep you more comfortable, and there's a whole bunch of things we can do, from how we prep to the type of grilling that we're doing to even some supplemental tools, three of which I'm going to share with you that I use to help make grilling in the winter months more enjoyable. But let's start at the beginning with even the grilling techniques. And so I often use my Joe as a smoker with the dome closed, and so you get a little bit of residual heat from the dome, but changing to grilling versus smoking is not only a fun experience if you're doing burgers, sausages, or even, you know, that spit or open rotisserie. You can enjoy the heat from your grill just as much as your food. Is a great way to stay warm, see what's going on inside, and it practically again warms up the entire surrounding area near your grill. So first tip here is try grilling more versus smoking, because that again is a great way to stay warm and continue using your grill. The next tip is all about preparing your food ahead of time. So do that prep work inside as much as you can, reduces the amount of time that you're exposed to the elements, and again, popping in and out for short little bursts doesn't sink in, the cold doesn't sink in the same way, and will just make it a lot more enjoyable. And then the last one here on the creature comforts is some of those tools. So outside, again, I use a regular, hoodie or fleece lining jacket, but what I'm talking about here for tools are heaters. And so I'm going to show you the three heaters that I use. I have some gas heaters that put off some good heat and energy, some electric heaters, as well as my solo stove. And I'm going to try and see if I can get a reading using my Thermapen IR to gauge sort of what temperature we're getting, as well as just tell you, standing here as the person, no matter what the IR probe says, if I get close enough, is what do I actually feel. So let's start over here with gas. So in our sitting area where we have a gas fireplace, we also have these gas heaters, and just standing here, these are throwing a ton of heat. This is an enjoyable place to be. You almost won't even know you're outside. So I'm curious, if I have my IR gun, if I can get a reading. I'm going to go for the metal shroud here, just like I can do on the electric heaters, and give you a bit of a reading for what temperature we might be at. 178 degrees is about the average that I'm getting on that shroud. And on my head right here, this feels like I've got a hair blower, maybe one of the hotter hair blowers I've ever used, just sitting constantly on me. So if you're sitting down in a position like this, where you've got your grill nearby and have a chance to have one of these above, these throw a ton of heat. Now let's move on to the electric heaters. They're a little bit higher up, so I never find they're quite as warm as this, but let's go get a reading from those. So I had to go wide angle so you could see this, but this is the second one. So these are they're Bromic brand electric heaters. I forgot to mention those are habanero gas heaters. And so they provide some good heat. I have one over on this side, one on this side, and they sort of converge here in the middle where I'm often standing for my videos. Let me see if I can get a bit of a reading. These have been on the same amount of time for all three, if we can get a bit of a temperature read. So the IR gun is reading about 543 degrees right in the middle, but I can't really get the metal shroud like I could on the gas. What I would say from a heat temperature perspective is, given the distance is much higher than it was with the gas heaters, where it's basically sitting right on top of my head, is you can barely feel this heat. This is a nice sort of gentle warmth, but it'd be like walking into a room with a space heater about 10 feet away. You can tell there's some warm air moving around, and it's definitely much better than outside where you don't have that heat. But in comparison to the gas heaters, it's not throwing as much heat. And again, a little bit of that is difference, but I also think total BTU is limited. Plus, on a cost per hour basis, these are significantly more expensive to run than gas. So if I was looking between these two and doing that again, I might look at the gas as the winner. The reason we didn't do gas here is that the gas ones need to sit from code even further down from the roof, and they would be protruding sort of in an awkward low-hanging spot, which is why they're hanging in the pergola. Let's go on to our last and final option here, which is wood burning fires with the solo stove. So now that we've covered gas and electric, let's go into wood burning here, which is the solo stove. So this is definitely the most portable and the most financially affordable option. So both those gas heaters and electric heaters, when you add in all the components, the supply, the trade work, we needed a better breaker for the electric, we needed to run a new gas line, as well as switches and components, the costs really add up quick to be thousands of dollars. And while the gas one in particular provides great top-down heat, neither one does a really good job at keeping the lower section warm. Solo stove is kind of the opposite. It does put off good radiant heat. If I try and get just a reading here on the outside, 509 degrees Fahrenheit. So obviously as you go further and the wind is higher, that would cool off, but I am feeling a lot of great heat sideways here, as well as straight above. You're getting that tornado of heat. But it doesn't just stop at a tornado of heat. I saw online Solo Stove is making this heat diffuser plate that if you're seated around the fire pit, that's going to push that warm air out and help keep those toes warm, which is something I'm really looking forward to trying. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more on these 3 different heaters in a full review, but that's really the key point for today. If I were to look at cost and portability, these tools are a great way to stay warm outside, but for my money, Solo Stove, portability, least expensive option, hard to beat that. So I hope, armed with this information, that you have the confidence to continue grilling. You know some of those adjustments to make sure you're getting good information, along with some of those things you can do, from creature comforts all the way from how you use your Joe to maybe supplemental heat sources that work really well in these sub-zero temperatures to help make the whole experience that much more enjoyable, that you find yourself outdoors and enjoying your Kamado Joe this winter month, or these winter months. That's it for today's video though. I'm James from Smoking Dad Barbecue, signing off, and remember, don't be afraid to fire it up.